Hello everyone, you are just joining in our literary heaven, the Literary Nook by Fairy. Let's start our today's topic, but before going further, don't forget to subscribe the channel, like the videos and share. Today I'll give you a brief synopsis of the play by Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venus. The Merchant of Venus contains as many as four stories, which, however, have skillfully and closely been interwoven, and we get the feeling that we are reading a single story. The various strands which go to make up the play are: the first one is the bone story, the second one is the casket story, the third one is Lorenzo Jessica story, the fourth one is the ring story. The principal characters in the Bone story are Shylock, Antonio, Bassanio, and Portia. The principal characters in the Casca story are Bassanio and Portia. The principal characters in Lorenzo Jessica story are Jessica and Lorenzo, who is a Christian and an intimate friend of Gratanio, Slario, and Solanio. And Lancelot Gobbo also plays a role in this story. The principal characters in Ring story are Portia and Bassanio, Nerissa and Gratanio, with Antonio also playing a role in this story. Antonio is a Christian, a native of the state of Venice, and a wealthy moneylender by profession. He is in the habit of charging high rates of interest on the loans which he gives. In fact, he may rightly be described as a usurer. Antonio hates Shylock because Shylock is a Jew and because Shylock is also a usurer. And Shylock hates Antonio because Antonio detests Jewish religion, and also because Antonio brings down the rate of interest in Venice by lending money to the needy persons without charging any interest. This hatred between the Jew and the Christian forms the whole basis of the Bone story. Antonio's friend Bassanio needs about 3,000 ducats in order to be able to pay a visit to Belmont. Bassanio wants to go to Belmont in order to try to win as his wife a rich and a beautiful lady Portia who lives there. Having no money, he contacts Antonio and asks for a loan of 3,000 ducats. Antonio has no cash in hand at this time, and although he is a man of substance and high prestige, he cannot immediately give any money to Bassanio, for whom he harbors a profound affection. All Antonio's ships are sailing upon the seas, and all his money is invested in the cargoes which they carry. However, he now asks Bassanio to get a loan in his Antonio's name from some moneylender. Bassanio approaches Shylock, who, after a good deal of fuss, agrees to lend the money, imposing a tough condition on the Christian Antonio. The condition is that if Antonio fails to repay the amount within 3 months, Shylock would have the right to cut off a pound of flesh from any part of Antonio's body he likes. Shylock's motive in imposing the condition is that if at all Antonio, for some reason or the other, fails to repay the loan, he, Shylock, would get an opportunity to kill Antonio by cutting off a pound of flesh from nearest Antonio's heart. Portia, who lives at Belmont, situated across the sea and at some distance from Venice, is not free to marry according to her heart's desire. Her father, while dying, had laid down a condition that she should marry only the suitor who would choose the right casket from amongst the three caskets made of gold, silver, and lead, respectively. The right casket, according to the later father's will, is the one which contains Portia's picture. Anyone wanting to enter the contest is ordered to choose a casket has first to swear an oath that if he fails in the test, he would not disclose to anyone which casket he had chosen and would furthermore give up all thought of marriage in his life. Some of the suitors who come to Belmont go away without choosing a casket because they find the condition for entering the contest to be too difficult and even forbidding. However, two illustrations or suitors, namely the Prince of Morocco and the Prince of Aragon, do enter the contest and they both fail. Then comes Bassanio and he marries Portia after making the right choice. He chooses the lead casket. On being unlocked and opened, is found to contain the beautiful Portia's beautiful picture. Just at this time, the news comes from Venice that Antonio has forfeited the bond which he had signed with Shylock. All Antonio's ships have been reported as having been wrecked on the seas, and Antonio has been reduced to bankruptcy. Just at this time, the news comes from Venice that Antonio has forfeited the bond which he has signed with Shylock. All Antonio's ships have been reported as having been wrecked on the seas, and Antonio has been reduced to bankruptcy. Shylock is demanding a pound of flesh to be cut off by him from Antonio's body. Antonio's life is now in serious danger. On knowing the fact that Portia tells Bassanio that he can have any amount of money from her to offer to Shylock and ask him to withdraw his demand for a pound of flesh. Bassanio rushes to Venice with the money to save the life of his friend Antonio, who had taken the loan from Shylock for his sake. The Duke of Venice has invited an eminent lawyer from Padua to come to Venice and decide Shylock's case against Antonio because this is a case of its own kind, and the Duke himself is unable to decide it. Having come to know that the eminent lawyer Bellario has been asked by the Duke of Venice to come and act as the judge. Portia contacts Bellario through a letter and manages to get from him a letter of recommendation for the Duke of Venice. Having got this letter of recommendation, Portia disguises herself as a man and puts on a liar's clause in order to take Bellario's place as the judge in the case because she has hit upon a plan to save Antonio's life. Portia is now the judge who is decide Shylock's case against Antonio in an open court of law. She first appeals to Shylock to show mercy to Antonio, appealing to him to demand any amount of money that would please him and not to insist on a pound of flesh. But Shylock doesn't relent. Portia then interprets the bond in a very ingenious way so as to make it impossible for Shylock to take Antonio's life by cutting his flesh from nearest his heart as he intends to do. She says that the bond specifies only a pound of flesh and doesn't make any mention of blood. She tells Shylock that he can have a pound of flesh but that he must not shed a single drop of blood in the process of cutting the flesh. Thus, Shylock found it impossible to carry out his purpose and then finally says that he would be content if it is paid 3 pounds ducats which he had lent to Antonio. But Portia says that having already refused money, he is now entitled only to cut a pound of flesh. Shylock thereupon gives up all his claims and would like to go home. But Portia says that as he has tried to take off the life of native citizen of Venice, he can be subjected to heavy penalties under the law. Eventually, he is forced to become a Christian and also to depart with more than half of his wealth immediately and to will the rest of his wealth to Lorenzo and Jessica, who would get all Shylock's possessions after his death. Thus, Antonio's life is saved, and the man who wanted to take his money and his life himself becomes the victim of his evil design. At the end, news is also received that three of Antonio's ships have returned safely with rich cargo abroad, and the play ends with mirth and laughter because Portia and Nerissa had been able to befool their husbands by their disguise and also by having obtained their rings from their husbands who had sworn never to part with those rings. That was all for today. Stay connected for more literary videos. Me, Fairy, signing out from the Literary Nook by Fairy.